now introduce Susan Lucas. Susan is actually a graduate of the PhD program at Wilfrid Laurier, the Department of Geography, but is now based at Temple University in Philadelphia, where she's an urban social geographer in the Department of Geography and Urban Studies. And her studies in particular take you into issues of gentrification, waterfront redevelopment, use of public space by homeless, the privatization of public space and retirement communities, and continuing to look at emerging trends in the U.S. towards developing suburban retirement communities as spaces of old age, looking at how such developments are marketed to prospective residents. So, I take it are you from Ontario?
No, I'm married a Canadian.
Okay. Well, I like to think that this symposium has given you the opportunity to sort of come back home to your roots here in Southern Ontario, so we're glad you're with us.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to apologise. I don't have a presentation. I don't even have printed notes. I just have scribbles on backs of other people's work. And this is to demonstrate to my two students who are here with me from Temple that professors leave everything to the last minute, just like they do. And we also use Wikipedia, but we're not actually going to admit to that. When I got the question for the roundtable discussion, I sort of went immediately into a panic because this is not really my research area. Just about everything I know about sustainable cities, I've actually learned from students who have done term papers on sustainable cities. So the first thing I did, like Karen, was to go to Wikipedia and look up the definition of what a sustainable city is. And I think Karen had mentioned that it's a city that can feed itself, power itself with renewable energy, and produce minimal pollution.
Is everyone here okay? Sort of thing.
As an urban geographer, something sort of struck me about this definition. There was no mention of the urban environment or the urban infrastructure. And when urban geographers think about the urban environment, a few things come immediately to mind and sort of almost influence everything you do. First of all, the urban landscape, the urban environment is long-lived and it's fixed. Once created, it's very, very difficult to change. And from those thoughts, I sort of started to think about the meaning of sustainability and whether or not cities are by definition sustainable. And that's sort of the topic that I'm sort of going to talk about. I found this whole notion of sustainable cities extremely problematic and quite contradictory. As an urban geographer, as an urban social geographer, to me, it's a difficult concept to kind of sort of wrap your mind around. If we take a sort of historical perspective and we go back in antiquity to the earliest cities, Greek and Roman cities were not very large in the big scheme of things, but I think they established very clearly a sort of exploitive relationship, in one sense an unsustainable relationship. A city takes from its hinterland resources and people. Those resources and people flow into the city, and negative externalities flow out of the city into the hinterland. Cities redistribute resources and they redistribute negative externalities in a very uneven manner. If we sort of think of the contemporary era, and particularly think about globalization and the very uneven impacts of globalization, I think the exploitative effects of cities have been greatly intensified. Cities increasingly draw resources, be it people, be it investment, be it capital, be it food, energy, into their confines, and there's an increasing negative outflow of externalities. And this redistribution under globalization is inherently and increasingly uneven. Some cities benefit, some areas benefit, some clearly do not. think if we are to recreate cities as sustainable, then I think we have to create cities and the relationships that are part of cities that are fundamentally different than they are today. And somehow we have to do that in an era of globalization under a very, very specific capitalist economic system. And I think at a very fundamental level we have to impose sustainability and ideas about sustainability on the pre-existing urban landscape. And I think that's going to be very difficult, and I think it's going to be very costly, and I think it's going to involve a significant change in how humans think and how cities are created. And I sort of have three reasons why I think this is going to be very difficult. First of all, as I mentioned, the urban landscape is fixed and it's very long-lived. The urban landscape and urban infrastructure is expensive and problematic to change. Any change that you initiate takes a long time to work through the system, and as that change takes hold, it produces a whole series of changes that you may not have anticipated that you then have to respond to. And I also think that we have to change our method of wealth accumulation. I think unsustainable cities may be a fundamental element of capitalism, just as urban places are a fundamental element of capitalism. Having said all of that, I sort of then began to think about current efforts to retrofit sustainability on the present urban landscape. Most of the comments I have about this are based on Philadelphia, simply because most of the work that I am familiar with from students or that I hear about through the news comes from Philadelphia. And I'm hoping these comments are sort of generalizable to other cities. You may know of similar initiatives. I think our current efforts to retrofit sustainability on the present urban landscape, we believe have a transformative effect. And I don't know if that's real or imagined, or if we're simply hoping that some of these small schemes that we've initiated are actually working. If there are transformative effects from retrofitting sustainability, I think they're probably highly localized and highly concentrated. They certainly are in Philadelphia. I think many of the initiatives are showcase efforts that are concentrated in sort of wealthy neighborhoods, and in the case of Philadelphia, areas populated by tourists. The northern area of Philadelphia, where Temple University is, hasn't seen many green initiatives because it's not very wealthy, it's quite low income, and it's not just the faculty. Few of these retrofitting efforts, certainly in Philadelphia, don't seem to involve fundamental changes in policy or fundamental changes in the means of accumulating wealth. And I think until these fundamental changes take place, at least from the perspective of an urban geographer, you are not going to make cities sustainable.